Today, we want to take a short time to talk about, fraud that's been in the news recently. And basically, this is the Oregon whiskey graft, a type of fraud that we're looking at. And, the alcohol regulators in Oregon are actually under investigation. Some of the senior people in the government agency have had to resign because of the issues with this. And basically, the people that were in the Oregon, it's basically for alcohol and marijuana, the department that oversees these substances, were able to make sure that they got the lead on when high-end whiskey like Pappy Van Winkle was going to be put up for sale, when it was coming into the state and when the companies were going to be able to have it. And of course, this was the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. And so they were able to get a hold of this information and put in reservations or show up at the store at the time this rare whiskey. We're talking about whiskey that's running for, $500 to $1,000 a bottle at retail. And one of the advantages of getting this stuff early, well, one, you get to drink it. Oh, wow, I can serve my friends this fancy, expensive whiskey. The other thing is, it works kind of like Super Bowl tickets. We just had the Super Bowl here in Phoenix, Arizona area where I live. And, the basic ticket price, if you bought your Super Bowl ticket from the NFL, was $500. Trust me, Super Bowl weekend, try to buy a ticket for $500. They weren't there. They were selling them for $6,000 and $7,000 a piece. And that was the same thing that some of these individuals with the Liquor Commission were able to do. They bought whiskey bottles for $1,000 and were able to sell it for $5,000 to $10,000, making some great money for themselves. So these are some of the issues that we understand exist. Now, when we look at whiskey fraud and we think, oh, gee, who would, this is something new. It's not. Actually, there was a major whiskey fraud scandal during the administration of President Ulysses S. Grant. I'm sure you remember studying about him back when you were in school. And basically, at that point in time, agents of the Internal Revenue Service, the Treasury Department, and other individuals that Grant appointed that were working in his administration, were able to make a ton of money off of the whiskey distillers. So we're talking about back in the 1800s, there were whiskey frauds. So seeing fraud in the whiskey business isn't anything new. And it's a type of graft, which is a type of, when we look at it, we're looking at misuse of your position with the government in order to get personal gain out of it. So they were able to make sure that they were at the top of the list. When these high dollar whiskey bottles showed up, yeah, they were the ones who get to buy them. It's a type of corruption. Now, if obviously the employees of the agency, they came back and said, well, that's not really, that's not really a fraud because we paid for everything. They didn't give it to us for free. They weren't giving us, this. And we're talking about whiskey that ran thousands of dollars a bottle. But, again, if they didn't open the whiskey, it's really easy to sell it. So their concept that, hey, these bottles weren't stolen, there's, no crime. Well, there was still fraud. There was still corruption. They used their position with the government in order to divert these high value bottles of whiskey into their own personal reserves that they were able to use. Now, some of these cases, and there's been documentation from the investigation that, they bought them at the store, and some of them were able to sell them for as much as a 500% markup. Hey, I bought a bottle of whiskey for $1,000. I sell it for $5,000. I didn't misuse my position. Everything's okay here. Go look somewhere else. which is always what we have to deal with when we're dealing with graft in the government. They're always telling us, hey, go look somewhere else. And so we want to think about, some of the ways that this type of graft can come about, and how do we instill ethics into our government employees. Now, obviously, we have, a number of CPE courses on government ethics and fraud that, are open for anybody who's interested in finding out more about it. I'm not going to cover anything in a short, 10-minute talk. But we have to understand, what caused them to get caught here. And we understand the concept here. Think of Dr. Donald Cressy's fraud triangle. There was a pressure. In this case, the pressure was greed. I wanted to make money off of selling these whiskey bottles for more than I paid for them, or I wanted to be able to drink this really expensive whiskey that I couldn't get if I bought it on the open market. And many times what would happen, the stores would actually have a lottery type thing. People who were interested in buying these bottles of whiskey would put their name in a hat and then they'd get called. But prior to them selecting any names of the public, the government officials got to buy their whiskey bottles first. So obviously we know that a lot of people were upset about that. So, we had that pressure. The opportunity, of course, was, dealing with because you're a regulator, hey, if you don't do it my way, your license is going to be in jeopardy. And that's one of the things that, that they have to deal with. And of course, the fact that there were no controls in place with the government agency to make sure their employees acted in an ethical manner. If they were overlooked. Now, we know how this came about. We know, again, looking at the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners 2022 report to the nations on occupational fraud and abuse, a majority of frauds are discovered via tips. Same thing that happened here. Who turned them in? Well, the people who wanted to buy this rare whiskey, they had the money, they wanted to buy some nice whiskey to enjoy or to put in their collection, said, hey, wait a minute, it's not fair that these government employees are getting to buy this whiskey and we're trying to get our names drawn out of a hat to get our whiskey. And so we understand that, they got turned in and the investigation is still ongoing. Actually, this is brand new in the news. It just broke on February 12th. So, we've only been talking about this for actually, it may have been a few days earlier than that the story broke, but we started seeing the news articles on this, on how these officials were, basically diverting, this very rare, high value whiskey to their personal stores, whether to drink it or to sell it for a profit, rather than allowing the public, the people they were supposed to be serving. Remember, as a government employee, your job is to serve the public, not to help yourself to profits or benefits from your government position. So we've already seen a couple of people resigning from this. It's highly possible that more will resign. Whether or not any actual criminal charges, are going to occur, that's hard to say. I mean, the argument right now is, that they didn't do anything illegal because they paid for these at the price that anybody else would have had to pay for them. The only problem is other people didn't have access to buy them at that price. It's like, go to the NFL today and say, hey, I'd like to get on the list to get a ticket for the Super Bowl. And they might tell you, it might take you 25 years before your name comes to the top of the list. And you can get a ticket at, market price, because other companies, scalpers, travel agents, et cetera, are already on that list and they're getting all the tickets. They all get bought up. And that's what happened here. All the good whiskey was getting bought up. And, the other people who wanted good whiskey, no matter how much money they had, they weren't given the opportunity to buy it. So, I kind of look at this, I've been referring to it as the Oregon whiskey graft. It's just an interesting thing I thought I'd share with you in one of our, short comments, trying to keep you informed of what's going on in the world when we're dealing with fraud. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and everyone, have a great day.